Good afternoon, Beacons. Happy Cinco de Mayo. I thank you for joining us today for our spring town hall meeting. Today, my colleagues and I will share some important updates with you on a number of important topics. We have received a number of questions from our community members, and we have addressed them in various parts of today's presentations. Thank you for the questions you submitted. Before we begin, I would like to take a moment to observe that May is Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. Among the many challenges we've weathered this past year, there has been a horrific increase in hate crimes against our AAPI communities. I will reiterate what I've shared in my recent communications. We condemn with every fiber of our being the ongoing hate and violence against AAPI individuals and communities. As I have shared with our student leaders when we recently met, we are committed to better supporting the visibility of our AAPI students and issues on campus, providing safe spaces and enhanced supports for the AAPI community at UMass Boston, and publicly honoring AAPI heritage and holidays on campus. You will see in the screen, as I'm speaking, the resources that are available to our campus community. These resources will be posted as part of this presentation and are available on the UMass Boston website. We stand proud to be an ANAPISI institution. Commencement. I am delighted to share that we will have a cycle of celebrations for the extraordinary achievements of our graduates. On May 27th, we will air a congratulatory video that will feature brief remarks by our provost and by your chancellor, student stories, and a celebratory montage memorializing the journeys of our students, their resilience in this incredible moment in time, just as they are becoming our future leaders. I am pleased to share that on August 26th, we will have an in-person commencement celebration at the TD Garden for our class of 2020 and our class of 2021. The ceremonies at the garden will include an online component that will be the traditional ceremonial portion of the program with speeches, formal presentations by President Meehan, a selected representative from the Board of Trustees, student awardees, our two principal speakers, and your chancellor. The two principal speakers will be, I am very happy to share the news, Adrian Walker, Boston Globe columnist, whose work and writing focuses on politics and social change. He will offer his remarks to the class of 2020. And Secretary Kathleen Theoharidis, Secretary for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs. She will share remarks to the class of 2021. The in-person ceremonies will provide our graduates the opportunity to hear their names read, walk the stage, and have a photograph taken to memorialize this extraordinary achievement. Please, we also expect that graduates will have the opportunity to bring a couple of guests with them. Please stay tuned for more details. Summer and fall planning. While we will have a small number of face-to-face classes in the summer, the majority of our coursework will continue to be mostly in remote fashion. We are mindful, and please be mindful, that our safety protocols and reduced level of campus density will be kept in place. Please, dear beacons, know that we're working judiciously, all hands on deck, and that we will have in full the study of how the mode for return in the fall will unfold. We are now planning for a fall term based on the increased availability of vaccines and continued expectations of improved health conditions. Of course, we will continue to be paying close attention to health conditions in the peninsula, Boston, in the Commonwealth, and throughout our country. We are assuming, for purposes of the pandemic, that the majority of courses and activities will return with clear, precise safety considerations in place. We are assuming at this time that we will keep in place mask wearing, hygiene, and various other safety protocols. CDC guidance for vaccinated individuals is moving in the direction that social distancing may not be required among groups of vaccinated folk. Fall planning committees are diligently working on these matters as we speak. We are planning a thorough set of communications and guidance for the campus that will be shared in the weeks and months ahead. Our colleagues, Provost Joe Berger and Deputy Chancellor Garrett Smith, will report in more detail the plan for the fall shortly. We will also cover budget. In terms of budget, our colleague Vice Chancellor for Administration and Finance, Kathleen Curlis, will share full and transparent detail where we are and what the fiscal year 2020 results were and what are the projections for fiscal year 2021. In brief, after a full year of remote work, teaching, and learning, we have been able to improve the picture in terms of revenue and expenses, mostly by a combination of remote operations and savings accrued from stimulus funds. It is very important to note that the stimulus funds are a once in a lifetime injection of cash, and we have to be cautious and remind all of us that our structural deficit remains, but it is currently masked by the unique COVID-19 effects. I am especially happy to report that UMass Boston has distributed to date $14 million in federal relief funds to our students over this past year, including a total of $6 million in higher education emergency relief funds this past April. We will return to this in further detail shortly. Enrollment. I am very happy to report that year to date, we have seen a 48% increase, 48 increase in summer 2021 enrollment and a 19%, 19 increase in doctoral applications and a 42 increase in master's applications. I am also happy to share that for fall 2021, we have seen an increase year to date in first year deposits, which are currently up 14% compared to the last meaningful comparison year, which is the fall of 2019. Further, I am delighted to report that we have seen an increase of out-of-state deposits of 75%. Although early in the cycle, transfer admission is also up 29% in applications and admits and a 50% increase in deposits. I am enormously grateful to the extraordinary work of our admissions and marketing colleagues in delivering these new student enrollment results to our community. A special thanks to Vice Chancellor for Enrollment and Management, John Drew, and his team for his commitment and his dedication. He will be reporting out with some more details later in today's presentation. Capital projects and partnerships. Again, our Vice Chancellor of Administration and Finance, Kathleen Curlis, will give us a deep dive into the current state of our capital projects and where we are with various important endeavors, especially on the matter of the substructure demolition and quadrangle project, the so-called SDQD, and the ongoing transformation of our campus into a truly spectacular campus on Dorchester Bay. I am now happy to invite the Provost and the Deputy Chancellor, Joe and Garrett, to present on their portions of today's town hall. Muchas gracias.
Thank you so much, Chancellor. So I have the pleasure of providing an update for all of you on our plans and action steps that we'll be taking as we move into the summer and the fall. Let's start with the summer, which is most immediately upon us. The majority of the summer coursework will continue to be remote. We've had a planning committee working hard looking at this. We have received a handful of requests for courses that will have face-to-face components. We are working with those instructors to make sure that we have all of those plans in place so that we can continue with our track record of keeping the campus safe and healthy, even where we do necessarily have face-to-face instruction and activities. This will still be a small number of courses, but we will keep all of our safety protocols in place, and we will begin to focus on preparing for the fall semester. We encourage all students to be checking Wiser for your summer courses on a regular basis, as we will be updating the specific plans for which courses will be remote and which will be face-to-face, and what is the exact structure of the face-to-face experience in those very few courses that will be face-to-face. In terms of the fall, we are planning and have made specific commitments to be ready to have fall semester on campus. Based on the increased vaccination rates, which are increasing every single day, and the projections for health conditions over the coming months, we are confident that we will be able to return the majority of courses and campus activities to campus in the fall. No, please go back one slide. Thank you. If we are engaging in contingency planning, so that if things do change, we will be able to keep safety and health as our first priority. We have been asked, if there will be options for students to continue remotely. And we are looking at how to have a flexible approach, but that will emphasize face-to-face instruction on campus. Moving on to the next slide, please. Thanks. So the small portion of online and remote courses will be dictated through a process that the Fall Planning Academic Subcommittee is currently working on in conjunction with our faculty, our department chairs, and our deans to make decisions about what are the appropriate frameworks and parameters for safely returning to face-to-face activity, and where we've learned through the innovations that we've had to generate in our major shift to remote instruction throughout the year, where it makes sense to continue to provide either hybrid or fully online modalities. We have heard from many students, many of them, many of you are eager to return to engage with each other, to be back on our campus, to take full advantage of our in-person class offerings. We also know that there will be certain circumstances where it will behoove us to have some flexibility. But again, I want to emphasize that we are going to engage in best practices for student success and the ability to progress towards your degrees through face-to-face instruction that is augmented by innovative approaches to using technology. We aim to have all of the course details in Wiser by June 15th. So as of that date, students will be able to start planning in detail what their course schedules look like, how that fits in with the rest of their life plans. And we are really eagerly looking forward to safely getting together and seeing each other again in classrooms throughout our beautiful campus. And now I think I'm going to turn it over to my good colleague, Garrett Smith.
Thank you, Provost. It's fantastic to have you here on the virtual stage for your first town hall as Provost. I'm excited. I'm sure the other 500 or 600 people on the webinar are also cheering in their homes or their offices. Okay, my job here, now that Provost Berger has laid out what we're doing in the fall, particularly with respect to coursework, is to bring some additional data and thinking to bear on what underlies that decision, and to answer, at least to address some areas where there have been lots of questions coming in over the last days and the last weeks and months related to this decision making. So first, some metrics we're watching. What's some of the data that we're looking at? And I don't think this will be too dissimilar to what you look at, each of you on your phones and computers and on TV every day, which is, first of all, we're looking at vaccination rates. And we need to look at vaccination rates locally as best we can. We can look at the state rates, which I think as of today are 58% are partially or fully vaccinated. And then we can try to look at it on the eastern half of the state where our students and staff and faculty live. And so this just shows you, as of about a week ago, the vaccination rates fully or partially vaccinated by county, which is one of the ways that the data is released. One thing I'll say is there's a bit of variation by county. What's great is that the rates are high and going higher. If you compare to the national averages, the state is currently 13 points above the national average. So 58% in Massachusetts, 45% nationally. And so we are in a state where hesitancy is low and vaccination rates and intended vaccination rates are quite high. So that helps us both as a university and as a city and a state as we start to look towards a return to some kind of new normal. Paired with that, and this is the chart that's going to appear on the right-hand side, we know that our community, and I'll say more about vaccinations in a moment, but we know our community wants to get vaccinated. So in a recent survey of staff and faculty, those who responded, which we had a huge response rate, 88% said they were vaccinated or plan to get vaccinated as soon as they can get an appointment. So this is really positive news, and we're continuing to watch this go up as the days pass by. Next, we're of course also watching the COVID positive cases in Massachusetts and in Boston. And we're watching as they go down. We had the kind of mini spike around Easter and spring break and after spring breaks, and now we're seeing it come down rather rapidly day by day when you look at the 7-day average of cases in Massachusetts. And we expect this, especially as those vaccination rates come up and as the weather gets warmer, to keep coming down at a rapid clip. Of course, we'll all be watching very closely. And so we're also looking at COVID cases locally, but particularly on our campus as well. And this data just shows you our positivity rate through testing that occurs at UHS. Thank you so much to all our UHS colleagues who are there every day, facilitating about 900 COVID tests per week at this point. And our positivity rates have been very low, much lower than the community. And we had our own spikes in the winter, but for the past couple of months, they've been very low at 1 or 0 or 2 cases per week. Of course, like everyone else, we're also watching the hospitalization rates and the death rates and seeing those decline, still at tragic levels, but anticipating those to continue to decline as vaccinations go up and the cases go down. We're also watching, trying to find the leading indicators. Many of you probably have learned to look at this data of the Boston wastewater COVID levels, where the COVID RNA can be tracked in the city's wastewater. It's been the leading indicator when some of the spikes have come, and you can see on the far right-hand side that these levels are trending down, even in the last couple of weeks. And particularly from some of the peaks earlier in the winter. So these are just some of the metrics that we're looking at. Of course, we're also closely watching all the public health guidance, which seems to really have been changing all the time over the last 15 months or so. But in particular, as vaccination rates rise, we're seeing new guidance coming forth. So I'm not going to go through any of the detail, but new CDC guidance for vaccinated individuals, you've probably seen, or you can always click through once we post this and you can read it more closely. There's been new CDC guidance on travel, on cleaning and disinfection. There are new Massachusetts guidelines on travel. There are the reopening guidelines where Governor Baker has sort of indicated the kind of phased reopening that will happen through August. The American College Health Association put out a recommendation for vaccine requirements. Again, this is just a taste of the information that our colleagues in environmental health and safety and UHS and on these planning committees are looking at. And we expect more changes, right? So the plans that Provost Berger described really anticipate continued changes that as vaccination rates rise, particularly in a community like ours, when they go above 80 or 90%, my understanding is that's when we'll start to see the social distancing requirements lifted. We're still watching on all these things, and we anticipate further guidance, and we will share that and update our plans accordingly as it arrives. Really importantly, and I'm sure by now everyone has seen the memo from the Chancellor last week, we know vaccination rates are the best way to protect against the virus and enable our return. And that is why we've decided, both at the campus level and at the UMass system level, that vaccinations will not just be strongly recommended for everyone, but that they will be required for students. There's a process for religious and medical exemptions that will still exist, as it does for all immunizations. But for anyone who wants to live, learn, and research, any student who wants to live, learn, and research on campus, a vaccine will be required. This is new territory for vaccines that are approved under emergency use. We've never been in this situation where people have required them before, but we expect, and working closely with our legal counsel and our sister schools and the state, we do expect that vaccine availability will be high throughout the summer. We expect full FDA approval beyond emergency use will come relatively soon. And on that basis, we're planning to require the vaccine for students. At this time, we haven't gone that far for staff and faculty, again, through consultation with the parties that I mentioned. At this time, we're just strongly recommending for staff and faculty, and we're very hopeful, given the rates of intention that I mentioned earlier in the high 80s amongst our faculty and staff, that that's a level that will get us to a really safe place on campus. A couple other just quick notes about vaccinations. There will be lots more to come on this. We know there are lots of questions. Our international students, for example, have a lot of questions. Will we accept vaccines that are approved by the WHO? What about vaccines that are not? And we hope to have answers on questions like that soon. UHS continues to try to obtain vaccine supply. It's been really tough for local universities to get our hands on the vaccine. We've got Rob Pomalis's team in UHS has gotten some, and we've started to get creative to partner with the city and to try to partner with others to get more availability on campus, just to provide another option for all of our students and staff and faculty to get a shot if you want a shot, and to make it easy. An important note, if you're we're getting this question all the time now, if you're vaccinated, you do still need to, for now, follow all campus safety protocols. So surveillance testing, mask wearing, social distancing, all of it. Changes will come, but for now, please continue to follow and assume that you need to follow the safety guidelines. Okay, this is a big one. So we're coming back to campus for coursework. What does that mean for working on campus? For those folks who have not been working on campus over the course of the last year. So Monday, August 9th will be the date when all faculty and staff will be authorized to return to campus. So begin to plan Monday, August 9th. That does not mean that everyone will arrive on the same day back to work, but it does mean that that's when everyone will be authorized to come back. And so there will be a planning process that's kicking off, led by vice chancellors and deans, to build phased staffing plans. Some will need to come back sooner if your job function is needed to come back sooner to prepare for being fully on campus in September. Some may come back more gradually, but we really want people to start getting real in their thinking in anticipation of coming back to campus. To go with that, we know there have been many lessons learned over the past year as many of us have worked remotely. Lots of questions about what will flexibility look like in the future. We are well aware of these questions, and the process step we plan to take is to develop a committee, a how we work committee, whose membership will be drawn from the campus community to examine what we've learned, to look at this new normal, right? Because when everyone's not at home on Zoom, it changes the dynamic of how you Zoom. So we're gonna examine what we've learned, think about how it can be applied in the future new normal to continue to support quality of life for employees as best we can. A formal announcement about that August 9th date is coming. So you should expect to see that soon, as well as for those who can't join us today. HVAC, tons and tons of questions about HVAC. What is the air quality like in my office, in my building, in XYZ part of campus? So I'm just going to give a little bit of taste. I've been gaining some expertise thanks to our facilities and environmental health teams. And so I'll just give you a taste. We've been doing a ton in this area of HVAC. So we've been collaborating with an outside expert consultant to review our campus HVAC systems and to make sure that they're functioning properly in the context of COVID. Marie Bowen and her team and the administration has been collaborating closely with a coalition of the campus unions, both on this particular topic, but on a broader health and safety agreement or MOU, Memorandum of Understanding. And in keeping with that agreement, we continue to engage with EH&E, who's our consultant, and to closely monitor the HVAC system. So number one, we're really committed to ensuring the HVAC continues to work properly to give you the air quality that you need. Number two, and this is a little bit more in the detail, that involves sticking to ASHRAE guidance. This is the industry association for HVAC and air quality. So their guidance recommends that you consistently ensure that your systems are functioning properly. So that's one of the things that we're doing, is making sure that our systems are properly functioning at all times. Number three, you need to make sure that there's proper airflow. So ASHRAE guidance suggests at least 3 turnovers of the air with outdoor ventilation throughout the day in every space. And so we have worked to make sure that, again, that we're meeting the standard for our airflow through spaces. I've been learning about how air temperature is not the same as airflow. Sometimes the temperature in your office or in a space might not be exactly, where you want it to be at room temperature. That does not necessarily mean that there's not proper ventilation or airflow. And then the last point here is filters. So in terms of filtration, we've had a lot of questions. The MERV filters are sort of the standard here related to COVID. Do you have them? And the answer is yes. MERV filters in every building across the campus. Again, that meets standard. All this is enshrined in that MOU that I mentioned, or pieces of it are. And just Lauren, thank you to Lauren Luis, who's controlling the slides as you bring these points onto the screen. I probably won't read each one of them, but there are 6 different points that are embedded in that campus safety MOU related to HVAC. And so it's a topic of great concern to the administration and to the coalition of unions. And it's a topic that a lot of time is being spent on to make sure that we get this right for everyone's health and safety. More to come, but that's as much expertise as I have on HVAC, I think, for today. And more to come on a bunch of other topics. So our marketing and engagement team is working on a series of communications related to these topics here and more. I think we heard from staff and faculty in particular that they want to know more about what we've been doing to keep the campus safe and what we're planning to do to keep the campus safe in the fall. And so we plan to do as much communicating as we can on these topics, and you can expect a regular cadence of communication on not just the safety topics related to COVID, but also physical safety related to catwalks and construction, because campus does look not only different because of the pandemic, but different because of all the construction that's happening on Columbia Point. So with that, I will get out of the weeds for the moment. You can expect more soon, but that gives you a sense for the plans for the fall and some of the thought that is underlying those plans for the fall. And as the provost mentioned, if the health conditions don't move in the direction that we're anticipating, then we will need to adjust. But all indications suggest vaccinations are going to go way up. COVID cases are going to come way, way down. Social distancing is going to be less necessary in a community that's fully vaccinated. And so we can return to work on starting August 9th, and we can return to class starting September 7th. With that, I will turn it over to Kathleen Kierleis for the budget update.
Thank you, Garrett. It's my distinct pleasure to be with the campus community this afternoon to talk and provide some information regarding the campus's budget. So there's three major areas that will be focused on this afternoon: the operating budget, federal stimulus funds, and the capital budget. For the operating budget, we'll take a look at the adopted budget that we spoke about at the last town hall, have an update regarding the Q2 results and the projections for the remainder of the fiscal year, as well as some information regarding the fiscal 22 preliminary budget. For the operating budget that was adopted by the Board of Trustees last summer, this budget began to be developed in the very first months of the COVID pandemic. So at that time, there was different information available. We had planned for a semester where only the fall was going to be remote. As you'll see, when we talked more detail at the previous town hall, we expected revenue losses in every single area of the university's revenue streams. As we planned for those revenue losses, we also made plans to adjust for reduced levels of expenditures and to think about what costs would be associated when we were operating remotely in the fall. We did, doing this work, did get to the charge of having a balanced budget for the fiscal 2021, and also began to look at the time we were doing the budget in last summer, the only stimulus money that was available was the CARES Act. So the CARES Act, when it first came out, as you might recall, was focused on getting our students aid to help them through the pandemic, and then helping institutions focus on remote instructional needs and some of the direct COVID costs. It was much more restrictive than some of the stimulus funds that we're now seeing. So that we were beginning to look at that and put some of those funds to use as well. So now that we've progressed in fiscal 22, we've been monitoring our fiscal situation. And as you can see on the next slide, we have moved to report through the second quarter, which ended December 31st. We reported that to the Board of Trustees at their April meeting. And here we've now made updates to some of those original assumptions that had been part of the budget. We know more about the pandemic. We knew the whole year was going to unfortunately be necessary to be remote, and made adjustments to the budget relating to that. We also experienced improved revenue on both tuition and fees and the state appropriation. Through the hard work of our enrollment management group, our graduate studies, and everyone in the university who's associated with retention, our enrollment was higher than we originally budgeted, particularly in the in-state student area. So our in-state undergraduates, we exceeded the budget, and that helped offset some of those planned decreases in international students that we had planned for fiscal 2021. We also were pleased to see that the state, as they were also assisted by the federal government with one-time stimulus money, was able to maintain their support of the University of Massachusetts. And instead of having any appropriation cuts, we're able to provide pretty level funding to prior year so that the university could continue to operate with a consistent level of state funding as well. So as we went through the second quarter, you'll see that our revenues were much higher than what we had originally planned for at the beginning of the fiscal year. As a result, we also were able to back off some of the expense reductions that were necessary. We didn't need to have as much expense reductions when we had more revenue to support the operations of the university. We also were able to focus on further deploying stimulus funds. We could get some of the stimulus money out to our students, and we took an additional $1.8 million of institutional funds and turned those over to additional student grants to provide funding in early January for students. And then we began to apply some of these funds to costs that we had associated with the health and safety requirements of the pandemic, and to support some of the remote instruction that was ongoing. And so as you see, as we get to the end of the second quarter, we now not only have a balanced budget, we are in the position of having an $11.3 million surplus, which is a 2.6% operating margin. The drivers of these surplus are threefold. Go to the next slide, please. First, remote operations. Remote operations, these are one-time kind of savings that have affected the university's budget this year. As we've all been working remotely and providing instruction remotely, some of the costs that the university incurs in a regular year have not had to take place. Specifically, utilities. Many of our buildings have been closed, very limited usage. Utility costs are millions of dollars less than what they would be in a normal year. We don't have shuttle buses running this year because we've been in remote operation. Travel's been non-existent for faculty and staff. All the restrictions around travel have limited the ability for anybody to travel. And then service and supplies for many of the things that we do on campus, we just haven't had to incur. So those are one-time savings that we've been able to realize that are helping to drive the surplus that we're seeing this year. We also, as I mentioned in the second quarter results, we have improved tuition and fee revenue. This part's really exciting for me as the Chief Financial Officer, because this is the part that is part of the structural budget. What we do with our results for enrollment, this is stuff that moves forward, can help us move forward and can help us make investments in the university long-term that aren't a one-time kind of investment. And then last but not least, driving the surplus this year are stimulus funds. As the Chancellor mentioned in his remarks, these are once in a lifetime kinds of funds that are going to help the university stabilize its finances and move forward in the post-pandemic environment. We also, as time has gone on, this fiscal year have begun planning for the fiscal 22 budget, which we have we started back in December, taking an initial look at how the budget was going to look if we rolled existing operations forward. Guidance went out to departments, non-personnel operating budget targets went out. All departments of the university were hard at work on their budgets over the winter. There's been operating budgets, capital budgets, proposed fees that were submitted both to the Provost's office and to the Office of Budget Management. We had budget hearings in March, so academic colleges and schools went in and spoke with Provost and his team. Other vice chancellors spoke with the Office of Budget and Financial Planning. We put all this together and submitted a preliminary budget to the system in April. Part of that budget actually went to the Board of Trustees at their April meeting, which was tuition and fees. And the board adopted tuition and fees for next year at that meeting. This is several months earlier than they have done in the recent past. So this is really great news because our students can plan for the cost of attending university next year in a way that's already been with rates that have been approved by the board. So that was a big improvement in the budget process from where we sit. And then the rest of the budget will go to the board at their June meeting, where we'll be looking at the remaining parts of fiscal 22. And then we, on the university side, will finalize budgets for departments. There's some outstanding items of additional requests that we'll be looking at as we see how the revenue picture shapes up. And then we'll get that in place so that we can hit the beginning of the fiscal year with budgets in place. And then we'll continue to monitor enrollment revenue assumptions between now and the time of a drop in September, so we really can get everything in place. So what does that look like in before that? So just for tuition and fees, I just wanted to point out with the adoption of tuition and fees, they're going to stay at the same levels as they were for fiscal 21. So no increase in tuition in the mandatory fees for our students. This is the third year in a row that those fees have remained flat. So just wanted to let the community know about that. And, there's been some stability in the tuition rates for our students. However, on the university side, that has created, as we've seen the tuition rates be flat, as you'll see on the next slide, we've still had increased student need, particularly in the time of pandemic. So we're seeing a negative net fee tuition growth over this time because we've had increased student need and some of the discounting that's been associated with the tuition and fees. But we're keeping an eye on that. We'll see how things shape up. But overall, getting tuition and fees structure in place now has been very beneficial for us as a university. So when we look at the preliminary budget, which was submitted to the system in April, we were required to submit a budget that was balanced. Here we're planning for a return to campus, and we're planning for increased revenues. So we know enrollment's improved. I worked closely with enrollment management, made some assumptions in the budget to have some increased enrollment. We assume auxiliaries are returning. We're going to come back to campus. Some of those things that are function in the business type enterprises in the university will be restored. State appropriation at the time was assumed to be flat. I will speak a little bit more in the presentation about since the time we submitted this in April, the state has come out with some parameters for collective bargaining. So those will be added to the budget when we submit it, when we go to the board of trustees in June. But at the time, we were planning flat appropriation. And then we also were using some stimulus money to get this budget to be balanced with the zero operating margin. Because our revenues increased, we also need to plan for the expenses associated with that, as well as returning to campus. So we put our heads together, all the departments. For salaries and fringe, we're planning for a much more stable personnel environment next year. We're planning for base level of employment, no furloughs, no hiring chills, really budgeting positions and letting departments go ahead and operate using their personnel budget. On the non-personnel side, we continue to budget for COVID-related expenses. I want to assure the campus community that we'll spend what it takes to make sure that the campus is safe and healthy for folks with equipment and supplies. And we, unfortunately, are in a good position with the federal government stimulus money of having funds to support that. We also are making some strategic investments in the budget for next year. So the things that you've heard the chancellor and the provost speak about in terms of the strategic plan, the capital master plan, restorative justice, the capital campaign, those types of things are being built into the budget so that we can take the university to the next level with some of the strategic initiatives that we've been looking at. And then we also, as part of what was given to targets for next year, we did have $3 million worth of savings that was able to help us really get to that zero budget that was necessary. So I will point out, we do have $8.2 million here of stimulus money used to get to the zero. So we have a structural deficit, but the stimulus money is going to allow us some time to get ourselves sorted out and get back on track as we see how we come out of the pandemic. So, the overall purpose of these stimulus funds, in addition to helping our students, which half of the monies has been associated with that, is to provide universities the opportunity to stabilize their finances and have additional time to work their way through the pandemic. UMass Boston is in the fortunate position of is primarily being a commuter school. The pandemic has helped us it's affected us differently than some of our other UMass colleagues who are much more heavily invested in residential facilities and their budgets tied to that. So we have a slightly different impact than some, but we also have challenges, because our students commute here, right? And that really helped us have to think about things last year when we went remote, because we knew people were coming from all over the place. So with the budget, I just, here is listed, you can check these out, some of the assumptions we made with the budget that helped us, put the budget where we think levels will be for next year. When we did all that, we still resulted in an $8.2 million deficit. And then we're planning to use stimulus money to close that gap so that we'll be at zero. Like other years, this is just the start when we submit the budget in April. There still will be adjustments that will be going on with the budget. We will go to the board in June with a budget that they will actually adopt. So before we get to that point, we will be updating for actual enrollment results. So the enrollment results that John Drew is going to talk to you about after me, we will be taking a look at those and incorporating those into the budget to the extent they're different than what we had in the original budget. We also will be updating the state appropriation as the state goes through its process, continues on its budget path. Right now, the governor's released his budget, the House has released their budget, but the Senate is going to release their budget on May 19th. So then we'll see what the state budget shapes up as, and we'll make any adjustments that we might need to at the budget at that time. We have received the state parameters for collective bargaining. Those will be incorporated into the budget for fiscal 22. So the parameters as released were for 3 years. The first one affects the current fiscal year. So we will, in the projections that we're doing for current year, we will include 1.5% one-time payment on a base salary for fiscal 21, and also then correspondingly a special appropriation that the state would then do to fund their portion of the salary increase for the state funded payroll of the university. Next year is 2%. So we'll put that into the budget. That'll be part of the budget that goes to June. It wasn't part of the numbers that I just went over with you because we didn't know about that back when we submitted the budget in April. This just came out. So that'll be adjusted. And then as we plan for next year, there's also a 2% increase in fiscal 23. So that will be put into the budget as well. We continue to develop our stimulus fund planning. Some of the guidance related to these funds has been coming out in dribs and drabs from the Department of Education. The HERF2 funding, this is the CARISA funds. These are the funds of the second round of stimulus money. Here we're working to understand what the revenue recognition requirements are associated with this tranche of money. They've been a little bit all over the place, but it seems like at this point they're more closely mirroring the CARES Act. So that was when, if you make awards to your students, then you recognize the corresponding amount of institutional stimulus money as well. So we're working on finalizing that. The HERF-3, or the American Recovery Plan, that's the last round of stimulus money that was awarded. The guidelines are still coming out. The Department of Education hasn't finalized everything. So those are in process, and we'll be doing planning with those as the guidelines come out. And then as HERF-2 and HERF-3 came out, some of the guidelines for the original CARES Act, otherwise known as HERF-1, don't we love all these abbreviations in higher ed? I mean, but the first act, CARES, was they changed it and made it more liberal in terms of how we can use it. So we can now use the original money that's left in the CARES Act for other things besides remote instruction and direct COVID expenses. So one of the things that's allowed is foregone revenue. As you saw from the budget that was adopted, we've lost money in so many areas of the university in fiscal 21. So this stimulus money will allow us to recover some of those losses and get us back on track. So we're just going through the methodology so that we know how this act works exactly, so that when auditors come in, we're going to pass it and not have any issues, and we'll be building those into the plans. As I talked about earlier, we're also looking at the additional strategic initiatives and requests that people have made throughout the university on things that are just necessary to continue some of the good work that's going on here on campus. And then last but not least, we'll work to arrange to use a portion of some of the surplus funds to reduce the SDQD borrowing and future debt service costs, which in turn will have a positive impact on the operating budget. Federal stimulus money. This is a lot of questions come up about federal stimulus money. It's a once in a lifetime opportunity for the university to really help navigate through the pandemic. There's been a number of programs that have come out to help support institutions of higher education. For our campus, there's 5 large programs that have we've received support for. The Federal Emergency Management Agency has helped us in some of the most direct kinds of costs associated with, personal protective equipment, costs to ensure that we have staffing for some of the things when we were closing down the campus and going remote back last March. The Governor's Education Emergency Relief Fund. This was about $889,000 of money that came to us from the state. The state had, as part of their CARES Act, set aside some money for higher education that they called the Governor's Educational Emergency Relief Fund. And our portion of it was the $889,000. And we fully expended that, used that to help with some of our COVID costs. We also benefited from the CARES Act. We've talked about that in previous town halls. Also, as part of this, we did receive money as a minority serving institute as well. So we received 2 sources of money under the original CARES Act. We have had new for this fiscal year, the Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriation Act, as well as the American Rescue Plan Act. So all these together really create a tremendous opportunity for us to get ourselves in financial order and invest going forward as we come out of the pandemic. As part of that planning process, the University of Massachusetts has adopted some guiding principles for campuses to use as we think about these plans. First is to bridge from where we are to a post-COVID environment. So, thinking about what's it going to take to get back on campus? What are all the things that we need to do to support the items that the provost and deputy chancellor just talked about in terms of fall plans? Part of that will be backfilling lost revenue for fiscal 21 and 22 to stabilize some of our resources, so we aren't showing debt and can able to continue to support some of our ongoing operations. We're also going to look at some one-time investments and then strategic investments to grow revenue. So things in the area of enrollment, retention, and program research, those kinds of things. We also will be looking at post-COVID operating requirements. So here, stimulus money to address student health and wellness, workforce stabilization consistent with our operating plans, augmenting space for health and safety reasons, looking at flexible hybrid learning space. Some of you may be familiar with the Beacon Flex pilot that's been ongoing. You're really looking at how we can support technology like that as we feel that helps us. And then targeted capital and technology improvements. So these are kinds of guiding principles that all the campuses are looking at as they prepare to use stimulus money. And we'll certainly be looking at here at UMass Boston on how this helps us best here for our own specific needs on our campus. We have 2 committees that are assisting in this planning process. So first and foremost, the focus to date has been on deploying student aid. And we have a student aid committee who's really gotten the job done, working on getting student awards out for the portion of stimulus money that's related to supporting our students. And then we also have a second group that's will be working on institutional aid, whose work has not been quite as robust yet to date as the student group, but we'll be picking up as these guidelines get finalized and as we see how the stimulus money will be used to balance our budget and then provide opportunities for investment. On the student side, this was shameless plug, this was completely lifted from John Drew. This is the original CARES Act funding for students. So this just want to show you the breadth of the support that went to our students. Thousands of students were able to benefit from the stimulus money. So we did do 4 tranches of money, including the additional $1.8 million of institutional aid that we turned into student aid. And so students were able to benefit at multiple points during the past year for pandemic relief through an application process that they did for the university. We've continued that work in the current semester. So on the next slide, you'll see that we provided $6 million of funding in the current semester. Here we went to a different, not only did we do application-based, but we also went to a formula-based award. So there's details here. You can review it at your leisure when we post the materials here from today. But suffice it to say that our students have been able to have the aid. It's not sitting in the bank anywhere. It's out in their pockets, being able to be put to use to help them through the pandemic. For the university, I just want to put some numbers out there so that we can begin to prepare a foundation for how the stimulus aid on the institution looks. Here, as I spoke, there's 5 main tranches of money for the university. FEMA is more of a direct cost reimbursement, so that's not here, but the other 4 are. And if you'll see on the charts here for CARES, I'll just use that as an example. You can see the money that we spent in fiscal 20, both on the student and the institutional side, as well as 21. The amounts that are green on these boxes, these will be finalized as the budget progresses. So they're going to be planned for using the guidelines that I spoke to earlier. But you'll see there's, as the Chancellor said, once in a lifetime opportunity here really for the university to make some decisions and to invest. So we do have on the website a special portion, a page to talk about all the federal assistance. So the link here is down here at the bottom of the page. So I would just encourage folks, you feel free to look at that at your leisure. There's lots of information that's there that discloses more about the use of these funds. And then last but not least, the capital budget. So we did approve a 5-year capital budget at the beginning of the year for $254 million. We've since increased it to $293 million since the last town hall because we've had an increase in the SDQD project budget that I'll speak about a little bit. But our capital budget consists of 5 major funding sources that are listed here. The biggest being the state through DCAM, OMBA through the bond proceeds that the university borrows, and then local funding that the university generates through depreciation and the operating budget that we put to use for capital projects. For SDQD, we did wind up going to the board to have a budget increase since the last town hall. We went in December for an increase of $26 million. This became necessary even after the university took several efforts to have cost management efforts. So we really looked at elimination of certain scopes, including our catwalks, resequencing of the project, and simplifying and reducing the remaining scope. But even with all that, the complexity and the specialized nature of the construction added scope and cost to the project. There's a lot of reasons why on a project that large and that complicated that was, but 3 of the major ones was as the project advanced in design, it just became more complex as more the details were worked out and known. We have a large complex substructure here that's in very poor condition. That's not anything that's news to any of us here on campus. But that condition really created some significant logistical challenges for both the experienced estimators to price and bidders to bid. So we worked through that. And then the construction market, as much as we hoped during the pandemic that construction prices will go down and maybe we get some savings there, we did move some of the work to first shift and that saved some money, but pricing hasn't gone down. And so there really wasn't significant funds to be saved through continuing construction through the pandemic. So the board did take this, at the December meeting and improve the budget. So it's up to $181 million now. I will say there's opportunity for us to restore scope that's been eliminated as part of the upcoming capital master planning process and the planning for the use of the Dorchester Bay City proceeds. So there'll be more to follow on that. As Garrett noted in the communication cadence that's going to go out, we're going to have a whole communication come out probably the end of next week, beginning of the following week, that talks about the catwalks and provides more information about this. And we'll be having more discussion around it. But I just want to put as part of today's presentation that we had to go to the board to increase this project budget as part of the work that's been done since the last town hall. For the next year, we're planning for a local funding of capital budget of $20 million. This is the matches up the amount of money we'll be generating from depreciation. We also plan to have $6 million left over from this year that we'll put to use in that budget as well. And then last but not least on the capital budget, work has continued this year. We did have a construction delay, as you may recall, at the beginning of the year when the city of Boston shut down all the construction and so on. But that has resumed. And I think you see on the next slide, we're planning to spend about $13 million this year, and we'll carry the other 6 over. When you come back to campus in the fall, you're going to find a new roof on the McCormick building. You're going to find a new roof on Quinn. iHub, which is the university's data center, has been completed. The greenhouse has been relocated. We've had a chiller project that's been done in the Clark building to help our hockey program and the hockey rink. And so there's been a lot of activity while we've all been away that the facilities department's been hard at work at. IT is also updating the network, so that's underway and that'll be done. And research, we've continued to invest in the research program of the university with equipment purchases that have been done in various areas. So, capital budget is in good order, and we will be, continuing the planning as we proceed for additional planning for fiscal 22. So with that, I'm going to turn the program over to John Drew to talk a little bit about our enrollment.
Good afternoon, everyone. Our enrollment has been mentioned a few times, so I'm going to provide a bit more detail on our projections for summer and fall 21. Before looking to the future, I thought I would just take 1 minute to kind of take a step back and reflect. It's an understatement to say that this has been a challenging year. I'm very proud of how our campus has handled and responded to things, but also how our enrollment has fared over the past few semesters. You may recall that we were one of the only campuses in the area that experienced growth in both new and continuing students last fall. We also saw an uptick in the spring semester, and that really is a testament to our continuing students who through difficult times hunkered down and still prioritized their UMass Boston education. So very proud of them. Fast forwarding to summer and fall 21, we have a lot to celebrate, starting with summer. And if you want to move forward on a slide, that'd be great. There you go, perfect. We are once again capitalizing on the fact that our summer courses are being offered in a bit more of a flexible modality. And as the Chancellor noted, we are up 48% in summer enrollment. Now that comes on the back of a really a banner year last year as well. So these numbers are truly impressive. I think a few of the things that are leading to our increase in summer, certainly, as I said, the modality is assisting and helping with that, but opportunities for tuition breaks, scholarships, more tailored and segmented marketing, all that's coming together. I also think that we're creating a culture in which students are recognizing and the supportive staff are being advised to help take courses or to take courses in the summer, which really helps with their degree progression. So I appreciate everyone who has been helping get the word out around summer. Other notes for summer that are exciting is, and it was mentioned that our applications through our doctoral programs and our master programs for those that have summer starts are also running well above last year's numbers. You can skip to the next slide for me. Moving to fall of 21, it has been a very strong admissions cycle for first year. And we're also seeing some great success in our transfer. It's a really challenging transfer market. I'll be honest, I had concerns about what it meant to recruit a class when most likely students would not be stepping on our campus at all. We certainly take advantage of the fact that we have a beautiful campus out here on the peninsula, and we're proud to show that off. And we were faced with the fact that we were not able to do that for this recruitment cycle. Fortunately, our virtual offerings, relentless outreach, and our overall recruitment strategy helped us to net about an 18% increase in first-year applications. I think it's also worth noting that we were incredibly intentional about reaching out to the community, to those areas that were most hard hit, first generation students, low income communities, to make sure that they were being supported and were submitting an application. We didn't want them to be lost in the shuffle with everything else that was going on with the pandemic. So comparing deposits, we're actually a little over 1993 now. They keep coming in, which is exciting. It is hard to make comparisons, as the Chancellor noted. So we do have a comparison up there for fall 20 on this same date. So we're running 700 above that number, but we think a more fair comparison would be about a month later in fall 2020 or to fall 19, and we're running up compared to those numbers as well. So very excited about our fall first year prospect numbers. It's also been noted, and I think needs to be recognized again, our out-of-state deposits are incredibly strong. We'll be welcoming over 300 out-of-state students to our campus, first-year students to our campus this fall. And I think that provides a lot of opportunities for our campus, provides opportunities for our students to engage with other students that are coming from different geographical areas. But also, as we think about the declining rates of students graduating from high school, we need to make sure we're diversifying the students that we're welcoming. Two other quick footnotes, and then I'll talk about transfer for a minute. Also, I already talked about out-of-state, but I also wanted to mention that our Direction for Student Potential numbers, a program that will be welcoming over 300, more than 300 Massachusetts students this fall, is also running well above last year's numbers. So those students will be coming onto our campus this summer for an academic experience and developing some really important social capital and be prepared to join our class in September. So I'm very proud that the numbers for that program are also running really well above last year. On the transfer side, there's a few stats there on the slide for you. I mentioned that it's a really difficult transfer market and transfer landscape, but we are seeing, we're currently up 29% in applications. That's trending in the right direction. And our admits are also running above last year, and our deposits are currently running about 50% up. There are programs like accelerated nursing that has additional starts that are contributing, but we're starting to see growth in other academic programs really across the board for our transfer numbers. So a lot of positive news to share. I guess I'll wrap up just by saying we recognize in enrollment management that recruiting a class is not done in a vacuum. So I really do appreciate everybody in the community that has helped us, has come out very often on Zoom, which is exhausting, and helped to welcome new students and helped us reach out to parents and students and support them. Also, quick plug and thanks to the Division of Enrollment Management for all their hard work, and a special thanks to our Director of Enrollment Management, Corey Ford. So stay tuned, more numbers will come, but lots of good news to share at this point. And I will kick it back over to Kathleen.
The last section of our presentation today involves some information regarding the university's capital projects and partnerships. So specifically, we'll spend some time with information regarding SDQD, Dorchester Bay City, and the Calf Pasture Pumping Station. So for SDQD, work is well underway to develop the future central quad for the university. We have done a number of renderings over the past several months, one of which is here, as plans begin to take shape and become more real. Much work has been done on the demolition side in the past several months. The Science Center is completely demolished. As I look out my window today here on campus, there is a big rubble pile where the Science Center used to be. And with that rubble pile comes a rubble crushing and construction operation. So all that rubble is being crushed down and will then be used as fill for the construction of the new quad. So if we go to the next page here, is because of all this rubble, we are temporarily putting it in different places on campus. So we've got 3 sites here that we've got rubble that's going to be stored temporarily while we build the new quad. So we're using Lot D, we're using Site A, which is between the Calf Pasture Pump Station and EMKI's parking lot, and then Site S over next to Wheatley at the far end of the campus. So these are all being used temporarily. You'll see the little trucking routes here. You can check this out at your leisure when the presentation is posted. But we're out and about getting debris moved over there, and then it will be put back into the quad as the quad is being constructed. Other work that's been underway on the demolition excavation side might not be immediately apparent to your eye when you come to campus. We are well underway doing demolition to prepare for the installation of the Healy elevator. So one of the new things with SDQD is that there'll be an elevator going from the plaza level up to the main entrance of the library. And there's been demolition being done to prepare for that. We also have been slab saw cutting the old quad to prepare for our excavation. So really getting some of that work just out and about and getting it done. Then with Wheatley and McCormick, I'm happy to say one of the great things that's happened while we've been away from remote instruction is we've been able to do this work without many of the campus occupants of these buildings actually being on campus and having to live through this work. We've been repairing the concrete slab and the decks and the substructure of those two buildings, as well as strengthening the columns they're in the bottom of the building so that the building will be in good shape for several decades to come. This is noisy, disruptive work. And we're so pleased that we were able to do this while much of the campus was remote. So it's the vast majority of it's done and it will be minimal disruption to folks in the buildings as we come back to campus. But you will see if you come on campus between now and the middle of July is pile driving. So pile driving is one of the next phases in the project to build the quad. The piles need to be installed so that the quad can support the levels of load that'll be built in the space. So there's 126 of these piles being installed. It's underway. It's noisy. It just is disruptive. Also glad that this is being done well before August 9th and folks being authorized to return to campus. So we are doing, there's seismic monitoring in place. So we are monitoring the noise and vibration. You know, if you are on campus and there's issues, please contact the facilities department, the project. But we are keeping an eye on it. But this work is underway. There's piles being driven and will be done in mid-July. Also with the project, how we get around campus is changed. So marketing and engagement is working hand in hand with the project to get information out to the community about what this looks like. But what you'll see is, as we've demolished the science building, the catwalks came down and there's a temporary walkway in place that will be turned into the permanent plaza that will be there. But there's also opportunities to use the Beacon Walk and as well as University Drive South to get around. If you come to campus from the JFK T-stop or Bayside and come to the campus center, we still have indoor connections, catwalks to University Hall, to Wheatley. And then there's the temporary walkway to get folks to the rest of the part of the campus. If you're coming in from the West Garage, you've got your option of going through service and supply, connecting into the Quinn building, going over to ISC and the existing catwalk, going to the Healy and the existing catwalk, going out into the temporary walkway to get over to the campus center. So there's all kinds of ways to get around. There's wayfinding and signage and information that's being developed so we can make it as easy as possible for folks when we come back to campus to understand where we're going and what we're doing. I appreciate everyone who's on campus right now bearing with us as we've gone through this, and people have been doing a great job getting around. But there is a big construction site right in the middle of campus right now, and so we've got some different ways that we'll be getting around campus once we return in August. I would also encourage you, we've been working with marketing communications. If you don't already follow the university on Instagram and Facebook, if you want to do that, you'll be able to get more images and more information about these projects as it progresses. So really, I'm getting the word out around this project through social media as well. For Dorchester Bay City, work has also continued on that project over the last several months. It's just as a refresher, this project involves the development of two parcels that are shown here. The first is the UMBA-owned Bayside parcel, which UMBA has awarded the development of that property to a company called Accordia. Accordia also, after they were awarded these development rights, went out and purchased the Santander site, which is the second site here. So all in all, there's 6 million square feet of property being developed. The city of Boston requested that the developer develop both these parcels together, so that they're doing that in tandem. But the work has been being done to really help shape what some of the future plans for the parcels might look like. So with that, as we've talked about before, this is going under the Article 80 process for the city of Boston through their permitting process with the Boston Planning and Development Agency. Accordia has already presented a draft plan of mixed use for the property that they have been out and are underway with the permitting process. The city did form a citizens advisory committee to plan and work on the public review of the project. Matt Fenlon, the assistant chancellor, is our representative on the committee. The committee has had several meetings already, and there'll be more meetings that will be held as the permitting process progresses. There's also been presentations to the Boston Civic Design Commission that have been completed by a developer. Most recently, the BPDA took all that information, issued a scoping determination to Accordia. So that's one of the required steps in the permitting process. And now with that scoping determination issued, Accordia then now has to prepare a response to address the issues and concerns that were brought up in the scoping determination. So some of the things that we're going to see next associated with that are draft impact report that they're preparing, as well as they're also working on some of the environmental requirements for the project by working on an environmental impact report that will ultimately go to the state, to the Mass Environmental Protection Agency. Some of the questions that came in for the town hall were about the financial impact of the project. So just to review that, the value of this project to UMass Boston has a range. It can be a minimum of $192.5 million up to $235 million. The use of these funds would be restricted to qualified capital investments. So that could include many of the projects that might be planned in the campus's upcoming capital master planning process. This is a cash transaction for the university, and a university presence is not planned as part of the development at this time. Certainly, once we see what's developed, and if there were some things where we wanted to occupy space at a market rate kind of a situation, that's something that could be potential in the future, but at the present time, right now, this is being developed without a university presence being planned. The vehicle for this development is a 99-year land lease between the UMass Building Authority and Accordia, with the proceeds for the development coming to the university when the permitting is complete. So we get the money up front very early in this process. Right now, we're tentatively planning for that for June of 2022. So that could change, give or take a few months, depending on how the process goes. But that's the current plan. So it'll be an upfront payment to the university. And the development is anticipated to include, a variety of academic and life science space, net 1,700 new residential units, retail and commercial uses, as well as significant public space. So there's more information that can be found on the website here noted below, but we certainly will continue some of the work associated with this project as the next months progress. We also have had work that's been underway regarding the calf pasture pumping station. As you might recall, this is a proposed development of approximately 10 acres. It's very different than the Dorchester Bay City project, in that this is a project where we do expect to have a significant campus presence as part of the project. So this isn't just a cash transaction for the university. This is a project where the university will also have a presence as part of that project. So there's about 10 acres. There's two parcels here. You'll see one of them is the parcel that has the calf pasture building itself in EMKI's parking lot, and the other one is Lot D. So if you go to the next slide, since we last met, the UMass Building Authority has hired a development consultant to help with the process for this project, Newmark Knight Frank. So they'll be on board. It's not pretty common in public-private partnership deals like this that the building authority would hire a consultant to help assist with this. So we're pleased that Newmark is on board. They've already begun working with us, and we'll look forward to continuing that work as this project progresses. There's also been an advisory committee formed of faculty and staff who've already met 5 times to discuss some development principles for the project and some potential uses for UMass Boston for the project. So basically helping us figure out what does success look like with this project. And I'm happy to say they reported some initial findings to the space committee today, and there's all kinds of activities and potential things that the university could look at to help figure out what success looks like. And I think we'll be plenty of opportunities for us to take a look and see how this can really be developed from a building that's boarded up right now to something that can really be something that's very shiny asset to our campus. The advisory group will also engage with other campus stakeholders at various points in the project. So this isn't a closed group. They're really going to be out getting some input so we can figure out, what is this going to look like for our campus long term. And then also it has the potential to link some of our key initiatives that we might identify in the upcoming strategic planning process with some partners in the private sector. So again, this project is also progressing. We'll have lots more conversation about this as time goes on, but just wanted to report out about some of these key accomplishments over the last few months. So with that, I'm going to turn the presentation back to our Chancellor for some closing remarks.
I am so grateful. Thank you for the presentations. I have to say that the ethic of care, as well as what Max Weber called the ethic of responsibility, with which our colleagues continue to do their endeavors to serve our students is truly under the most difficult of circumstances. It's truly moving to me. I'd like to take a moment to share with you just a few reflections on everything we have achieved together during this extraordinarily difficult year. We faced two monstrous, wicked pandemics, and so many issues that were thrown in front of us, and many things to celebrate. First, my first official hire was that of our new permanent provost, Dr. Joseph Berger. I am so grateful to Provost Berger for the dedication, the gusto with which he took on his new responsibilities during these most difficult of times. I am especially proud of the appointment of a first in the system, the Assistant Chancellor for Black Life, Professor Joseph Cooper, who will continue our work, taking the lead on developing the vehicles for engineering an authentic, anti-racist, health-promoting university moving forward. I'm very proud that the original seeding of the George Floyd Scholarship with my initial gift has now tripled. And I am so grateful for all the contributions from both within our community, across the and throughout the country, all the way to California. We received donations, and I'm very grateful for that opportunity. I am grateful to our colleagues that took the lead in the Sankofa series and the launching of another first in the Massachusetts system, a permanent commission on restorative justice at UMass Boston. I am so grateful, and we need to pause and celebrate the strong retention and graduation rates. I am so grateful to see that our students are voting with their feet as our enrollments for summer and fall continue to work. And that doesn't just happen. That is the extraordinary work, the extraordinary care with which so many of our colleagues have taken the responsibility of selecting, identifying, selecting, and supporting our students. We have a lot to celebrate, even in these very difficult times. I am extremely optimistic about the number of searches underway for permanent deans and for our permanent athletic director. And I am very happy, delighted to announce that we will be launching the strategic planning process for the next chapter of this, our beautiful public research university in the city of Boston. In closing, this has been a challenging year. This is the year that tested our mettle. I am proud to say that you, our faculty, our staff, our students, stepped up and met the challenge. And we have proved our mettle. We remained during these difficult times connected. We remained focused on the essential work of the university, giving the next generation the opportunities to learn, the opportunities to make progress towards their various degrees, the opportunities to flourish. And for that, I am so immensely grateful to all of you, our faculty, our students, our staff. Thank you. As I like to say, muchas, muchas gracias. Stay safe, stay strong, go Beacons.